Live from the NHTV studios in North Haven, Connecticut, this is the Open Mic TV show. I'm your host, Michael CUOMO. Welcome along on this Wednesday night, July 24th, 2013. I have a jam-packed show to get to for all my viewers out there. I'm going to be here till 9 o'clock live, as you can see. Ready to take your calls, questions, comments. I don't have any special guests tonight, but that will be changing next Wednesday. First and foremost, before I forget, I want to thank Charlie from Uncle B's Bait and Tackle for coming on last Wednesday night. Great informative show as we spoke and talked about fishing and went over some rules and fish stories and anything that pertained to fishing we pretty much covered. So thank you, Charlie. But I am excited for next week's show, and I hope you can make it a point to watch, mark it on your calendars. Obviously, if you can't watch it live next Wednesday night, I strongly encourage you to watch the replay on YouTube. But next Wednesday night, July 31st, 8 o'clock, I'm going to be having on a very special guest joining me here. His name is Steve Smolka, and he is from a place in Waterbury called the Counseling Center of Waterbury. And Steve is an addictions counselor, and he's going to be on to talk about, addiction and the root of addiction, the causes of addiction. And when I say addiction, we'll be talking about a variety of addictions, whether it's drugs, alcohol, we can even touch up on gambling, maybe sex, etc. And hopefully we'll be able to talk about some cures for different types of addiction. So excited to have Steve on. I not to talk about all this, a week prior, but there was a unfortunate story I just heard about over the weekend. Took place at one of my favorite pizza places down in New Haven, Modern Pizza, where I go, on occasion, if you want to get a pizza, I go down there. And I heard that there was an unfortunate story of a customer who went into the men's room and apparently overdosed in the bathroom, and there were people trying to get in to use the bathroom. The door was locked. They barged in, and he was apparently dead on the floor from a heroin overdose, from what I could gather. There was a needle on the floor, and so just a real unfortunate story. You go out to dinner, and next thing you know, there's a guy getting carted out who overdosed. So there's just so many stories like this in the news, pretty much every day, that I figured we'd have Steve on next week to talk about this and just see why it's so prevalent nowadays. I've heard some stories of kids as young as 14, 13 years old, pre-high school, already experimenting with drugs and alcohol. So the age has certainly gone down to younger levels as it has since I was a teenager. So anyway, it's going to be a great show next Wednesday night, July 31st. Again, mark your calendar, as I'll have on Steve Smolka talking about addiction, and it'll be a great show. I mean, it'll probably be emotional. If anyone out there has a personal experience with a loved one or a friend or family member who's battling addiction, or who possibly lost, to addiction, you're more than welcome to call in and talk to Steve and see if you can get any, support, advice from him, and, how to move on. 'Cause that's another step, obviously, is if you lose someone from this terrible illness, and, how do you move on from it? So we'll talk about all that next Wednesday. And before we get to the trivia question, if Nick can put up on the screen the Facebook and YouTube page. Well, there's the trivia question. Sorry. All right, we'll get to the trivia question in a second, but there's the YouTube and Facebook page. So go to facebook.com/openmictv and youtube.com/openmic80 if you want to catch up on any replays of the show in case you missed them. They're up on the YouTube page. If you want to become a fan of the Open Mic show, and you can click like on the Facebook wall and and become a fan, to be, a follower and of Open Mic, and see about upcoming guests, news stories, etc. I certainly appreciate any support that you could give out there in TV land. So yeah, and again, now if we can switch to the trivia question, there we are. Trivia question has to do with the obvious news of the royal baby, the royal family having their baby, who was a boy. Thank God, because there's already too many women in this world. But okay, so the question has to do with the father and mother of this baby. Where did Kate Middleton and Prince William meet? As you can see on the screen there, if you know the answer to the question, give me a call, 203-234-0025. As always, up for grabs is an Open Mic with Michael Cuomo coffee mug to the winner of that question. Maybe for extra credit, you can tell me in what country they also met in. So, hopefully you can do this without Google searching it. Maybe you can just go off of memory and call in. So, but anyway, there's the trivia question. So give us a call, 203-234-0025, if you know the answer as to where Kate Middleton and Prince William met. Up for grabs, an Open Mic coffee mug. So give me a call. So I'm going to now go into the news segment like I normally do, and I'm going to obviously start off with the big news, which is the royal baby, if you will. Very healthy baby, a little bit on the bigger size. 8 pounds 6 ounces was the weigh-in of the baby, who, by the way, they named him, and they waited about a day or so to come out with his name. I guess his formal name is going to be Prince George Alexander Louis. So that's a mouthful. Prince George Alexander Louis. I personally thought they were going to just name the kid Prince Albert, but that's just me. No, just kidding. So anyway, this is pretty much taking up all of the tabloid news, front cover, front page of every major newspaper and magazine across the world. These people over there in the United Kingdom are, eating this stuff up. They love this stuff. And, it's pretty much, I actually feel bad for the royal parents, Kate and Prince William, because they absolutely have no privacy. I mean, you see them going from the palace to now Kate's parents' house today to bring the baby over. No matter where they go, they're being followed by paparazzi, and there's 1,000 photographers taking photos of them. And this poor little baby, yesterday when they brought him out to introduce him to the world, he's screaming and crying, and obviously had to be subjected to thousands of flashes and noise and people screaming. So I mean, you kind of feel bad for the kid that he can't be in a nice quiet room in a rocking chair, or in his bassinet or whatever it is, his crib. He's being shipped all over this the United Kingdom, and obviously the world is in love with him, and he's going to be a future prince and whatnot. So cool stuff going on there. But again, it's kind of surreal that we're living in 2013 and we're still talking about royalty and kings and queens and princesses and all these different terms that we would typically associate with like the 1500 or 14th century and King Arthur. And but anyway, I don't know if anyone out there has any take on the royal baby. If there was a name you thought they should have named him instead of George Alexander Louis, you can certainly call in and express your opinion. So again, weighs in at 8 pounds 6 ounces. One thing I wasn't sure was if Kate Middleton had a C-section or if it was delivered, naturally, if you will. I don't know if there's any news about that, because that's quite a large baby, and she's obviously a very petite, fit female. So that's certainly, I wouldn't know from experience, but I would assume that would be uncomfortable if it wasn't a C-section. But anyway, she did look good. The day after delivering a baby, regardless how it was delivered, she seemed to be, with it, and certainly seemed to be her normal self. Just had a little bit of a, post-birth baby belly syndrome going on, which obviously she'll lose in no time. But congratulations to the royal couple. Again, as everyone out there is probably on their computers, Google searching the question, where did Kate Middleton and Prince William meet? If you know the answer, give me a call, 203-234-0025, and take a stab at it. Up for grabs again, the open mic with Michael Cuomo coffee mug. All right, switching gears, another interesting story that's kind of taking over, headlines, the front page, if there's any room left after the royal baby news, is it's actually in this country, and it has to do with the politician in New York, Anthony Weiner, who has been in the news for all the wrong reasons as of the last 12, 18 months. However, he's now considering running and starting a campaign where he wants to run for mayor of New York City. I believe it's this year. It's got to be this November when the election rolls around that Michael Bloomberg is up for re-election. So the irony behind this whole story is, if you recall, last summer Anthony Weiner came out with his sexting, as they call it, story of photos of him naked, and he was sending them to a 22-year-old intern or something to that effect. And obviously he's married, so this obviously didn't sit well with his wife. She took him back. They reconciled and made up, and everything is merry. However, as he's now in the news again to try to establish his political career, there is more news coming out today and reports that he had more photos and more raunchy photos and messages that were associated with these photos that he was directing to, I believe, a different female. And the irony was that this happened last summer after the initial announcement where he apologized and had to reconcile with his wife. So I think once all that was under the water under the bridge, if you will, like 6 months later, this alleged incident happened. So now this is surfacing again, which is now reminding people of what happened to him initially. Sometimes time heals and you kind of forget about things, and you kind of forget about where people were associated with what circumstances or incidents. But I mean, this guy is now in hot water again for the same exact thing he did to get himself in hot water. He kind of laid low, and now he's back in the news, not only because he's running for mayor, but because of these inappropriate messages and photos that he sent to, and again, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was another female, different one than the initial one. So I feel bad for his wife. Obviously she's now in the spotlight. She has to be right by his side, supporting him as she's been doing. I'm hoping his skeptics don't lowball his chances of winning this mayoral race, and I think he does have a shot to win this race. That's assuming he doesn't pull out. But anyway, all right, moving right along. Drums, please. All right, we had another airline mishap. There's been quite a few of these happening recently. This one actually was very close to home. It's in LaGuardia, which I think is one of the busiest airports in the U.S. but there was I don't know if anyone out there saw the footage of a Southwest airline that actually had a pretty scary landing. There was a passenger who had her cell phone out taking, a photo of it landing. But apparently what happened was its nose gear collapsed as it was landing, and basically the plane skidded 2,175 feet more than it was supposed to on its nose. So it came crashing down. There was about 149 passengers in total on the airline that were, thankfully they were okay. A little shooken up. I haven't heard of any, severe injuries, but if you saw the footage, I mean, they showed it on, I think it was CNN, and you could just see the plane landing, and it just, lands on its nose and just keeps going and skidding, and passengers are bouncing all over the place. So pretty tragic. And again, we just heard about that Asiana, I don't know how you pronounce it, the airline in San Francisco, which was about a week or two ago. I think 3 people died, where they had another mishap when that plane was landing. So we've had 2 plane accidents that has, made national news in about 2 weeks. So kind of scary. And ironically, one's on the West Coast, as far west as you can get, and one is on the East Coast, as far east as you can get. So, 2 separate incidents, 3,000 miles apart in 2 weeks. Let's hope this is the end of the airline mishaps, because we, certainly don't. I mean, there's so many people out there that fly this time of year, visiting family, friends, whatnot. And although I will say, with the amount of airlines or airplanes that fly every day, the whole world, we'll put it in perspective. Statistics always show that it is much safer to fly than it is to drive, 200 miles or just to get on a major highway, 95 or 84, 91. So I guess it is safer to fly. The problem is, when there is a problem with an airplane, the consequences seem to be much more, dreary than it is if you're obviously, in a car. But again, I certainly don't mind flying. I think it's great. There was an incident where I flew from, I think it was Newark, New Jersey, and I actually flew to Buffalo to go see a Buffalo Bills game many years ago, about 5 years ago. And we left Newark, New Jersey, and I was in Buffalo at the airport within 45 minutes. And it was great. I mean, by the time you took off, you were landing. So it was, within a blink of an eye. Now, to put that in comparison, I actually did the same commute driving from Connecticut to Buffalo to go see a game, and it took 8 hours or 7.5 or whatever. So I certainly don't mind flying. I saved 7 hours of my life that I'll never get back. So I certainly wouldn't drive again. You can't really beat, a quick flight like that. I mean, it's great. But anyway, now this is another story that it's a lot of bizarre stories going on this last week or so. We all know the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin, case. George Zimmerman was found not guilty. He was acquitted, exonerated. Life goes on. But this is actually very bizarre. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this watching tonight, but George Zimmerman is back in the news, and this time it's actually for a good reason. He allegedly was with a fellow male passenger in their car or vehicle down in Florida over the weekend, and as they were driving on an interstate, I don't know, we'll say 95, which still goes into Florida, there was a Ford Explorer with a family of 4, parents in the front, 2 kids in the back, that had rolled over and actually tipped over off the highway and went off the beaten path, into the embankment. And obviously they were in need of help right away. So George Zimmerman and this other, guy that he was with, passenger, pulled over when they saw what was happening, and they actually assisted this family of four by getting them out of the vehicle that had overturned before the 911 rescue personnel ever arrived. So as the cops and ambulances and fire trucks arrive, they see this truck overturned with now the four people in the truck out of it, and there's George Zimmerman, who is now pretty much a household name in all of America, standing there giving the cops his version of what happened, telling them that he obviously helped his family, and then shortly after that, him and his friend left. So, as much as he's trying to stay, try to keep his identity low and stay out of the limelight, here he is, obviously in harm's way, helping this family, and obviously he didn't have to do that, so I do commend him on this. But at the same time, he did take a really risky move there, because there's people out there, his lawyer has even said there's people out there that want bad things to happen to him. I mean, he's been getting death threats ever since the trial has started, and now that he was found not guilty, there's people that are very upset with George Zimmerman. And now for him to basically show himself, and I don't know if he was dressed up where you couldn't tell it was him, if he was wearing a hat, glasses. I mean, I'm assuming he was, but still, there's some sort of risk involved with someone that's wanted as bad as he is, to actually step out and do something so publicly. It was kind of a risky move, but I guess at that point, when there's a family like that in need, you kind of risk your own life to help them, and that's what he did. But I saw George Zimmerman's attorney actually tonight on CNN talking before I came here to the studio, and he was saying that there's a good possibility that George Zimmerman's going to have to move out of Florida. He's going to have to change his identity, change his name, change his appearance, just because there's so much hatred towards him that it's just not safe for him to stay in Florida, not change his identity or his appearance, and just go out in the public. I mean, he's in hiding now. So it's kind of a bizarre twist of events. But anyway, again, if anyone's tuning in late tonight, the phone number is 203-234-0025. Give me a call. The trivia question, which, up for grabs again, is the open mic with Michael CUOMO coffee mug. There it is. Thank you, Nick. Where did Kate Middleton and Prince William meet? If you can tell me where they met, if you want extra bonus points, brownie points, you can tell me where the place they met is located. That would be even better. Give me a call. Take a stab at it, 203-234-0025. Again, if you are tuning in late, just a reminder that next Wednesday night, July 31st, mark your calendars, as I will have a special guest on joining me here live at 8 o'clock. Name is Steve Smolka from the Counseling Center of Waterbury, and he's an addictions counselor coming on to talk about the recent events that have basically taken over a lot of the local news, especially in Wallingford, which is right up the road from us, pertaining to addictions and kids getting involved with drugs, alcohol, etc. So it'll be a very informative, interesting show. Be sure to come up with some questions. You'll have a whole week to prepare, and this way next week you can call in and ask Steve your questions. If you have any stories you want to share, obviously you can do that as well. So it'll be a great show. Again, that's next Wednesday night. And speaking of guests, I do have some other guests that are booked. However, the date is mid to late August. I have a couple other guests booked for September, so I don't want to start announcing the dates of the other guests just yet, because we still have a lot of time in between. But I do want you to know that we do have guests booked that are, definites, and I will make the announcements probably starting in the beginning of August. The first show of August, I'll make the announcements for the guests that are coming on in August, and then towards the end of August, I'll make the announcements for the September guest, and we'll just keep going on. But trying to get guests on, as you can see, from a broad range of backgrounds, and from a fitness expert we had on a few weeks ago, Mike Bouchard, to a fishing, bait and tackle guy like Charlie last week talking about fishing, to next week's show with Steve talking about addiction, to the other guests that I'm having on, which are from different backgrounds and walks of life. It just obviously makes for a more interesting show. It broadens the horizon. So hoping that everyone out there enjoys the guests that I'm trying to get on. And, maybe towards election time, November, I'll try to get on Mike Frieda, First Selectman of North Haven, who is pretty much a regular here at NHTV. He does come on to a lot of the other shows, and I don't think he would have a problem coming on to talk. Probably would get him on in, late October, early November, right around election time. And perhaps Len Fasano, Senator Fasano, I had on prior on the open mic show when I was doing it out of the Wallingford studio about a year and a half ago. So certainly could touch base with Len and see if he would be willing to come back on. And again, if anyone out there has any guests that you think would make or people that would be a good guest, and you want to, suggest them to the open mic show, you can certainly call in, or you can reach out to me on Facebook and, become like the show and comment on who you want to see on the open mic show. We're always open for suggestions. So, all right. Getting back to the news, and then, probably the second half of the show, we'll get into some sports. There's a lot going on in sports, but just a couple other notes here on news. There's actually a vote going on tonight. I don't know what happened with this vote, but there was a vote that was has to do with the postal service, the post office. And there was a vote tonight regarding doing away with the way the post office actually delivers their mail, which is, door to door, mailbox to mailbox, etc. Well, there's a California congressman who's proposing that the post office actually shift their service to a curbside and neighborhood cluster box to deliver their mail. I mean, this is his proposal, and in his words, it would trim about $5 billion a year in cost. So there's some sort of vote tonight, like a preliminary vote to see if it would even pass. I don't know if it's like the House of Representatives. I certainly don't think it's going to Congress or Senate. I think it's like a preliminary vote just to get a feel for what people out there are thinking. But I don't know. I mean, as I'm reading it and thinking about it, I don't know if I would be comfortable having like a neighborhood cluster box. I mean, what exactly is that? Is it a box that this whole neighborhood would have their mail in, and you would have to sort through it? I mean, I don't really see this passing. If you remember, the post office, I think it was last summer, they wanted to eliminate Saturday deliveries, and that was another way to conserve. That was a way to trim, I forgot, $1 billion a year, $2 billion a year. And as soon as you thought that was going to go through, they actually canceled that idea. So we still get Saturday deliveries. But this idea to, do a curbside delivery, a neighborhood cluster box, I don't see it working out. I don't think it's going to get approved. But it's unfortunate because the post office, in case you're up to, the knowledge of what's going on, I mean, they're pretty much, losing billions and billions of dollars each and every year. They're certainly not turning a profit, and there is just, it's looking very bleak for the future of the post office. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I certainly don't think this is going to certainly be the first step they're going to take. I think, I could possibly see them cutting down maybe to, 4 or 5 days a week, laying off several people. When I say people, I mean thousands of employees. But I just don't see this neighborhood cluster box for the post office happening. And again, this is only one person, a California congressman, who was proposing this. It's not even the post office, like the head postmaster or whatever that's proposing it. It's a congressman. So we'll see what happens. But now, ironically, speaking of Congress, this may or may not shock you, but Americans' approval rating of Congress has hit an all-time low this past month. There was an NBC Wall Street Journal poll, and it showed that only it's actually funny to read it. Only 12% of Americans approve of Congress's job. 12%. So, it's like what, 9 out of 10 people pretty much disapprove of Congress's job. Not looking good for a lot of the politicians that are up for re-election this year. And I'm pretty sure Connecticut we are voting for governor this year. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure, because I always hear about new names that are being thrown into the mix. James McKinney, I believe, was the latest name I heard. But I don't know any other names. But so if you're in Congress and you're up for re-election this November, chances are you're going to be looking for a new job, because based on this poll, if you're getting a 12% approval rating, then it's going to be very hard to try to get those votes in your favor. So, well, that's pretty much all I had for news. I tried to cover like some of the major stories that are going on in the world. But again, a quick reminder is we're blowing through the show already, less than a half hour remaining in the show, and I haven't even gotten to most of my other information. But quick reminder that, first and foremost, trivia question tonight. If you can tell me where Kate Middleton and Prince William, where they met, first person to answer correctly. And if you've already won an open mic mug in the last 30 days or whatever, you can certainly call and take a guess at it, because we're not going to limit, prior winners from trying to win again. It's pretty much whoever guesses first is the winner. So if you can tell me where Kate Middleton and Prince William met, you can win a open mic with Michael CUOMO coffee mug. Again, the two website addresses to certainly check out is youtube.com/openmic80. I was checking out the last few shows that have been on the air and going on YouTube and seeing how many views I get, which is pretty cool to kind of get an indication of how many people are watching the replays. And it's good to see that there's interest. And again, if you don't, if you know someone that obviously doesn't have AT&T Uverse, which you can watch the show statewide on AT&T Uverse channel 99, and then you scroll down to North Haven Public Access. Once you're on channel 99 and you go to channel 18, you'll be able to watch it. And obviously, if you're in North Haven and you have Comcast, you can watch this on channel 18. And if you have Uverse, you can watch this on channel 99. But assuming you don't, or if you or someone you know doesn't have Comcast or AT&T Uverse, you can certainly tell them to check out the YouTube page. Obviously, all the replays of the show will be up on YouTube by the next morning. So by tomorrow morning, tonight's show will be up, so on, so on. If you missed, a couple shows, or, someone that might be interested in a guest I had on, you could certainly refer them to the YouTube page, which is on the bottom of your screen, and certainly they can check it out. And Facebook, obviously, there's, I don't have a Twitter account set up yet. I'm still, still kind of like, I have the cold feet syndrome when it comes to Twitter. I don't know if I want to do that yet, but I think I might eventually have to give in to set up a Twitter account. It seems like everybody nowadays has a Twitter account, except me. But in the meantime, there is the Facebook page, which certainly everyone out there is familiar with, and it's facebook.com/openmictv. So if and when I do have a Twitter account set up, I will certainly let you know. But don't hold your breath, because it probably won't be for a while. All right, let's move on to some sports news. And there's a lot going on in the sports world. I know there's some people out there that love sports. There's some people out there that are kind of half and half when it comes to sports, or as we Italians say, mezza mezz. And then there's some people out there, I hate to say it, but it's predominantly the female population who finds sports and people talking about sports boring. So hopefully you fall in one of the categories where you like sports enough that you'll be interested with the news going on in sports, that you will still be somewhat entertained, because there is a lot going on in the sports world. For example, first and foremost, in case you missed it, there was the whole Aaron Hernandez news today. It was, on ESPN, and it was on CNN. All the major news stations had the broadcast of his hearing. There was an arraignment or a pretrial hearing set for today, and basically what happened was it was postponed now until August the 22nd. So I believe on August 22nd there's going to be a pretrial set, or some sort of trial. It's not the main trial. It's got to be like a preliminary trial or a hearing set for August 22nd regarding Aaron Hernandez. And then at the same time, the Patriots, the New England Patriots, his former team, their head coach, Bill Belichick, came out today and had a press conference around 2 o'clock to basically address this whole debacle, this whole situation with Aaron Hernandez. Now, there's obviously this fine line where you can't cross it, because it's still an ongoing investigation, and there's still, evidence that's coming out, and the whole 9 yards. However, it is very painful to listen to Bill Belichick speak, regardless if it was today or 10 years ago. I mean, he's just not a person that you'd want, that you would get a lot of information from, or a lot of emotion from when it comes to interviewing him. Very tight-lipped about a lot of things, very repetitive, and his monotone is just very, if you've never heard him speak, I mean, you can go on YouTube and watch some of his interviews. It's quite painful. Today was no different. He had a lot of questions asking about Aaron Hernandez. Why would you take a player who scored a 1 on his maturity test? Why would you draft someone who, was affiliated with some sort of gang, allegedly? And, he basically just kind of shied away from the question, said, I cannot answer this question. It's still an ongoing investigation, yada, yada, yada. I told all my players, not to address it. I think he may have used the word he was disappointed. I don't know if he used the word shocked, but basically the Patriots have moved on, as he put it. So they've moved on from here. But still, it was a typical Bill Belichick interview, question and answer. You weren't going to get anything out of him. If people were going there today, if media were going there with hopes of getting something out of Bill Belichick that they haven't heard already, well, first of all, they were fools to think that. And second of all, they would have left there disappointed because he certainly didn't enlighten us on anything that we didn't already know. So, speaking of NFL, believe it or not, most training camps are going to be starting in the next 24 to 72 hours. Depending on your team, some start on the 26th, 27th, 28th, etc. But, all 32 teams by the end of the weekend should be already started with their respective training camps. So what that means is basically we're going to be starting preseason games probably in about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. And then from there, we are going right into the season. So very exciting for all you NFL fans out there, including myself. I know we are currently in the midst of a baseball season. However, as I've stated many a times, as much as baseball is America's pastime and, it's a great family outing and whatnot, the season, in my opinion, is just way too long. You have 162 games and you're playing in the extreme heat. It just seems to be a very prolonged season that really doesn't pique anyone's interest until like September, October, when you get into the playoffs, divisional playoffs, and then the World Series. NFL, on the other hand, as I've stated in the past, and yeah, I guess I am a little biased towards the NFL because I do consider that to be the number one sport in America, is only 16 games in a season as opposed to 162. And then obviously you have preseason, which doesn't really count. A lot of starters don't play. But then you get the playoffs and the Super Bowl. So a much shorter season. If you ask any NFL fan, they'll say that, oh my God, I can't believe week 1 was here and now we're already into week 15. It just flies by. A much quicker paced, sport, much more exciting. And the ratings prove it. I mean, the ratings for the NFL just blow any other sport out of the water. So I'm not just saying that it's the best sport because I love it, but the ratings prove it. And the popularity and the following of the NFL proves that it's the number one sport in America. But again, there's a lot of baseball fans out there, and I understand. But where I was going with all this was NFL training camps are starting in the next 24 to 72 hours. Very exciting. Before you know it, the season will be here. And there's a couple things going on in the NFL. The biggest, I guess, story, we've been hearing about all the steroids and the performance enhancing drugs, PEDs they call them, when it comes to baseball. A-Rod, Ryan Braun, obviously, Barry Bonds, if you go back several years ago, Roger Clemens. But it's funny because this kind of goes back to the point I was just saying, where the NFL is the number one sport in America. You don't hear about, if an NFL player, fails a drug test, you won't hear about that as much as you would if a baseball player failed a drug test. And my point being is, the Denver Broncos a couple days ago had to suspend one of their all-star linebackers, Pro Bowl linebackers, Von Miller. I think it's his second season, for 4 games for a, substance abuse league rule that he violated. So it's an automatic 4-game suspension. And if you don't see this online, you're just not hearing about it. Unless you live in the Denver area, where obviously they're going to be talking about it. It's just not news. It's kind of just swept under the rug. Because I just think that people kind of sugarcoat, the people that love the NFL, they're just kind of, it's a little Band-Aid for him. You know, it's a player that messed up. We're not going to make a big deal out of it. We don't want to assume that a lot of NFL players are taking these PEDs, as they call them. So maybe this was just a 1 in 100, you know, player that took these, and it's not going to happen again. Now, on the flip side of that, we have Major League Baseball, where if a player tests positive for PEDs, then it makes the front page of the sports headlines. You hear about it in all the news. You hear about it all over the radio, sports, you know, talk, ESPN, et cetera, and it's just a relentless attack on these players. I don't know why there's so much animosity towards the baseball players that, you know, fail the drug test, as opposed to the NFL players that fail. But I do think that people don't support Major League Baseball as much as they do with the NFL. And there's more of a love and passion for the NFL. And I think by not talking about NFL players that have failed drug tests, it's taking the attention away from the bad image of the NFL. And they're kind of just like transposing it to the Major League Baseball side, which is pretty clever. Point being, we have several Major League Baseball players that are in the hot seat. And when I talk about hot seat, I'm talking about big name players with potential lifetime bans. And I'll get to some names, but let's get to a caller now, and I'll talk to you a little bit about these baseball players right after this. Good evening, caller. You're live on the Open Mic Show.
Hi, yes. Kate Middleton was a student at St. Andrews University.
University of St. Andrews. Yes, she was a student there, but where do they meet?
Where did they meet?
Yeah.
She was participating as a model, I think, at a charity fashion show.
No, it's actually a trick question. You're correct. You said she was a student there, but that's where they met. They met at University of St. Andrews. Now, do you know where that college is located?
University of St. Andrews. I have to guess England. Somewhere in London, England?
It's actually in Scotland, but it's okay. We'll give it to you. You were close enough.
Okay.
It was on the same.
Very, very nice couple. I couldn't believe when he actually got in the car and he drove away, and he was doing the driving when they left the hospital.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting, very down-to-earth couple.
Yeah, he was driving away with all the flash, globes going off, and
oh my gosh, yes.
I mean, poor guy. Thank God he didn't crash with all the glares of the lights. But
exactly, yeah.
I certainly don't envy the couple for all the attention they get, because you can't obviously have a normal life.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, but so congratulations, you won the mug. Again, Kate Middleton and Prince William met at the University of St. Andrews, which is in Scotland. And caller, if you want to just say your first name and where you're from.
Okay, I'm Jan from North Haven.
Jan from North Haven. Okay, well, congratulations on winning the mug, and if you can, just call back right after the show to leave your information with Nick, the producer.
Okay, Mike, very good. Would you ever have any shows about the meteorology, or any meteorologists, people that guests?
I actually...
Yes, on your show. I'm very interested in meteorology, and with the hurricane season coming up, kind of interested in that.
I've had a meteorologist on when I was doing my show in Wallingford last year. He's still a meteorologist on Channel 4. His name is Garrett Argianis.
Oh, okay. Absolutely, yes. I've heard of Garrett Argianis.
Yeah, it was a really great show. Nice guest. We talked about weather, and we did talk about hurricanes and the El Nino effects. And if you actually go on YouTube, you will see him and I with our show. It's one of my replays on YouTube.
Okay, excellent. Very good, Mike.
So, yeah, check it out. He was a great guest. So it's funny that you mentioned that, but he's certainly someone I would certainly reach out to again and see if he would come on.
Yes. I I think he's with NBC, is it?
I think, yeah, NBC Connecticut at that
NBC,
time.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate
Great. Thank you,
I appreciate that information, and we'll keep looking every Wednesday night.
All right. Thank you very much.
Nice evening. Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Yeah, one quick thing about Garrett Arjanis. At that time that he came on, he was just in the midst of transferring from, I believe it was Fox 61 Connecticut to NBC. Yeah, it was, right around the time where he was going from one station to another. And, but yeah, Garrett Arjanis was a great guest. If anyone out there knows of Garrett Arjanis, who's on NBC Connecticut, you can go on the YouTube page and you will see a bunch of shows that are on there, but you'll see the clip of him and I sitting behind the desk, and that's obviously the show that we did together. And I encourage you to check it out because it was a really, really fun show. But there you go. Jan got the question correct. Where did Kate Middleton and Prince William meet? It was at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. So she won the open mic mug, which she will be getting. And again, we don't typically do trivia questions the nights that I have special guests on, just because it takes away from the guest and whatnot. So we won't have a trivia question next week, but we will have one the week after because there's no guest booked for that particular show. Well, we just have about just under 10 minutes left in the program. It's flying by tonight, as they always do. And I always tell my special guests that come on, the show's gonna fly by before you know it. I'm asking you a couple questions, and then I'm telling you that we have to wrap things up. It just goes by like that. So, but yeah, as I was saying before Jan called, the Major League Baseball players that are in the news now, Ryan Braun of the Milwaukee Brewers, who isn't a huge name as like an A-Rod or Derek Jeter, but anyway, Ryan Braun was just suspended for the rest of the season without pay by Major League Baseball for his role in taking performance-enhancing drugs, also known as PEDs. Now, a bigger name that most people out there will know, male or female, A-Rod, Alex Rodriguez of the Yankees. There's now reports that sources close to A-Rod are stating that Major League Baseball is potentially going to have a lifetime ban for A-Rod. In other words, he's going to be banned for life from ever playing again in Major League Baseball. I mean, if that happened, that would be huge. Huge news. It would hopefully it would scare potential up-and-coming Major League Baseball talent to not, take these performance-enhancing drugs, and to, you second-guess that before you do it. Because, A-Rod at one time was the god of Major League Baseball, and now he is basically a punching bag, and we're going to hear about his suspension, I'm sure, coming up in the next week or two. But I don't think he's going to get a lifetime ban. I think A-Rod might get, I'm thinking like 100-game suspension, which is, 2/3 of a season without pay. And then I think it's going to be forgotten about. He'll be able to play once again, finish his career as a Yankee, assuming he stays healthy, and then life goes on. The irony, all these players that have taken these performance-enhancing drugs or steroids or whatever you want to call them, the list is just going. It's so many of them that are becoming injured. Basically, they take these, drugs to enhance their performance, as the name states, performance-enhancing drugs, but you can kind of spot the ones that have been on it based on how well they're hitting, how well they're pitching, etc., if their numbers go up as they get older. Plus, the ones that are more susceptible and prone to injuries, especially when they have hip injuries. For some reason, if a baseball player has, a hip injury, it's indicative of their use of these performance-enhancing drugs. One of the other names that's out there who hasn't been, wasn't proved that he has taken these is Miguel Cabrera of the Detroit Tigers, who is, one of the best players in baseball. However, his, numbers are off the charts. His home runs per year off the charts, his batting average, etc. And now he is showing signs of having some sort of hip ailment where he is, in pain. He actually missed a game the other night because of his hip. So I wouldn't put it past Major League Baseball to obviously, test him and possibly you'll hear his name thrown into the mix of players who might be suspended without pay. There's just so many names out there that it's just kind of like you hear about it so much, you get sick and tired of hearing about this each and every week. But again, it's just not going away. It's like a bad rash. It just stays around. And, Bud Selig, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, is going to be known as the commissioner who knew about steroids, who knew that, it was going on, and just basically turned his face to it. And it's unfortunate because he's going to have that stigma in italics under his name for the rest of his life. But anyway, real quick, speaking of baseball, as we wrap things up tonight, the Boston Red Sox, on a bright side, on a good note, player who hasn't been accused of anything, Dustin Pedroia, their second baseman, has agreed in principle to a 7-year, $100 million extension. I would certainly agree in principle and in pen to a 7-year, $100 million extension any day of the week. So good for him for, and here he is. I mean, Dustin Pedroia, in case anyone out there is not familiar, is about 5'6", 160 pounds, who most teams overlooked because, his size. He looks like a little kid out there. I think he played in San Diego State. And now he's basically a, all-star second baseman for the Red Sox, who's going to be a very wealthy all-star second baseman for the Red Sox. So, well, we are just about out of time. I don't know where the hour goes, but it is live TV. We do get, I get caught up talking in topics, taking calls, etc. Show does fly by. Real quick reminder, next Wednesday night, July 31st, please mark your calendars as my special guest, Steve Smolka, will be on to talk about addiction and the rising, reports of addiction that's going on in the community, in the area, especially in Wallingford. And then we'll have other guests lined up in upcoming shows, which I'll announce. Check out YouTube and Facebook and look at all the replays in case you missed them. Quick thanks to the guys in the crew in the control room. I want to thank Nick, Brian, Zach, and Martin, everyone in the back control room. Thank you very much for a trouble-free show as always, and thank you to all the viewers and callers tonight. So for everyone here at NHTV, I'm your host, Michael CUOMO, and I will see you next Wednesday night. Good night, everyone.